you very much, everyone, and for this kind invitation from South Summit. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. We are going to start an open discussion with our wonderful panelists about the challenges, the threats, and the opportunities for scaling up internationally a business out of Europe. Felipe, okay, we can leave the last one for Felipe.
Si viene tarde, no.
Viene tarde. Okay, we are missing Felipe from Job and Talent. Okay, Felipe. Okay, I would like to ask to the wonderful panelists we have here to introduce by themselves. Just before to give the word from them, I'm Alex Valls, responsible for Mobile Capital Barcelona, and also managing director of 4 years from now. Even I'm not a panelist, we are also facing the challenge to scale up. As an event, 4 years from now was starting 4 years ago in Barcelona with 2,000 attendees. Next year we're going to be more than 20,000, and we have a scale. We have a scale, and we have challenged the challenge to get international. We were in Tel Aviv a week ago. Isaac also was there. And we were in Shanghai last summer, and we're going to be in Silicon Valley next year. And there is a lot of challenge about culture, team, how you scale, how you're able to deploy operations internationally. In our case, we are in the AV industry. And we would like to know from these different amazing startups and companies, what are the challenges, threats, opportunities, and how to manage the idea to get into a completely different culture and completely different market. So, you want to start?
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you very much. So I'm Jorge Mencia, I'm the managing director of Uniplaces, and as same year happened, we are just in the moment of scaling and scaling fast and moving from Europe to the rest of the world, and just the main problems we're facing are about the legal staff, and of course talent. Hiring talent is the most difficult problem we're having now, and I think it's happening for most of companies here.
Okay. Like for the ones that didn't know, what is your company
about?
Yeah,
it's a marketplace for it's the global leading accommodation marketplace in the world, especially focusing on students and young professionals, which are moving from one country and one city to another, and they want to address this problem like way before going to a country and so on.
Sure. Alex, your turn.
Hi, I'm Alex Puerga. Pleased to be here in Spain because we consider Spain as the center of our activities, even though I think we already consider ourselves also a global company. So we started the path of expansion 10 years ago when we started. FON is the world's largest Wi-Fi network. We are creating a network of people who share their Wi-Fi. I have Wi-Fi, we all have Wi-Fi at home. What we do is we create a community of people who share that. We changed that. That concept is still the same thing. But what we do is we work with large telcos, and we do so globally. We have now offices, well, actually it doesn't matter how many offices we have. We have now footprint and partners in 20 countries on a large scale, I'd say in 100 countries when you take all the countries where we are present. I think we're, to mention some countries, we are the largest Wi-Fi network in Europe. We have a total of 20 million hotspots, but we're also the largest in Japan, in Australia, in South Africa, in Brazil. So we have a broad expansion on different markets, comes with a lot of challenges. Markets are very different. So global expansion for us has been a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. I don't think I'm wise enough to tell you how to scale everything globally, but pleased to be here.
Okay. Jaume.
Great, so I'm Jaume Suñol, I'm the country manager of Drivey for Spain. And Drivey is the peer-to-peer leading marketplace of car rental in Europe. So basically we have a platform where car owners, private car owners, can rent their own cars when they don't use it to travelers or people who need a car for a weekend or a getaway trip. Drivey was born in France in 2010. And 2 years ago, we started an expansion, basically through Europe. So this year, we are already in 5 countries. And when I joined Drivey, more than 1 year ago, we were 40 people. Now we are 80 people. And all these challenges of scaling the startup internationally, opening new countries like Germany, Spain, Belgium, Austria, we've experienced them very closely, so very happy to exchange here my impressions and how we are living it at Drivey.
Hi, good morning. My name is Isaac Martin Barbero. I work at ICEX, Spain Trade and Investment. I am the odd one out in this panel. I'm part of the government, and what we do is we work for you. Our aim is to be useful, assisting you to open yourselves up to the world, and also assisting our government in the mission to open our country up to people who want to come, join us, be part of the community here in Spain. And our basic aim is to be really, and we're going to be talking about many platforms, we wish to be a platform of platforms, basically making things easier for you. I just have been receiving some suggestions from Alex. He just told me we might not be as successful as we hope to be, but we are relentlessly trying to improve all the time. So please feel free to share your candid comments with us, and we will keep on improving. I'm thrilled to be part of this panel.
Felipe.
Hello, I'm Felipe. I'm the last minute guy. I am the co-founder of Job and Talent. For those that you don't know, we are a jobs marketplace. Probably it's kind of a crazy concept, because instead of being just a classified that we put in contact candidates and companies, actually we work with both of them, and we manage even all the contracts. So when you find a guy, you can hire him through the app, sign the contracts, do all the paperwork, do the payments, we pay the guy, we charge the company. So we're trying to build a community of trusted employers and candidates. At some point, probably we want to be the biggest employer in the world, even bigger than the China's army. But that will get at some point. In the terms of conquisting or going abroad, I mean, we have always been big fans of Amancio Ortega. So after landing here in Madrid, when we were just like 2 years old, we launched in London. And now we have been also launching in Mexico and in Bogota. Being honest, it has been a crazy nightmare to launch in all these places. It's super complicated, and we have been struggling a lot. In some of the cases, there have been good things, but also bad things, that I hope that we can share that with you today.
Okay, thanks very much for these introductions. Let's start this open discussion. Let's start with the positive side. Where is the romantic view of taking your idea, your project to another culture that you've never been there? How you decide, what are the drivers that you take there? Just business, because you find the right partner, because you have analyzed the markets and the opportunities there? Is because the talent that you are looking for is there? What are the key decisions, the KPIs that you consider at the moment that yes, it's time to go there, because we are mature enough, and why we decide to go, which country, and what are the opportunities that drive our decision to scale?
From our side, the main issue is the ability to create economies of scale within the country.
It's working?
It's working?
Yes. Not very good, no?
From our side, the main problem is the main driver for us is the ability to create economies of scale within our marketplaces, different sides of the marketplaces. From our side, from one side, from the supply side, it's obviously a real estate, but from the demand side, it's obviously a relationship between companies, universities, and students. So the dynamics between countries, cities, different universities and relationships among them habilitate our business to scale in a different way. Also, there are second-tier drivers like legal staff, ability to hire talent, but I think legal can be solved more or less, and talent, there's tons of talent out there, and most of the guys are open to go anywhere right there, and just you have to not pay peanuts.
Well, I think the question of scale starts with the mindset. I don't think it's even the right question. When do you go outside of a country, or when do you go outside of a certain market? I think that's only a phasing. If your mindset is this is a global proposition. The beauty of internet is that a lot of things, if they work technically in one part, they work technically in another part. Now you have legal limitations sometimes, and you have language limitations. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have both of those. But that's a big disadvantage if you compare ourselves with the US, where right away you launch something, and since they think the US is the world, they think global right away. You will never find that question in itself when you start something. When do we go global? Having said that, the reality is it's a lot more difficult for us as well. We started with the mindset we go everywhere. We build a global community. when you go to Japan and to Korea and to those places and you try to have meetings to set up and tell your story, the reality is they've never heard of you and it's a very difficult task. What we did in terms of a very strategic approach how to globalize, we just tested every market, literally. We raised money for actually globalization as well, but not spending a lot of money. We just went and tested certain markets. And just to give you an example of how what testing means, it worked really well in Japan, and it didn't work at all in South Korea. Two markets that are very similar. Well, they wouldn't like to hear that, but similar in terms of GDP and per capita. So sometimes you just need to go and test things of how it works in other areas. Of course, you always have the limitation, and I think that is what we need to live with, is the limitation of capital. Right? And capital is money, but also is really scaling the team accordingly. But I think the main thing to start with is, and that's what part of the discussion we had before. I have some more comments on Spain being a really attractive site for launching businesses, but the main thing is to think globally on day one. And that comes with launch the web page possibly in 2 languages right away.
In our case, it's funny because you mentioned testing. We are a platform for car rental, so it requires an insurance, it requires regulation analysis, and so it's not easy for us to test. We need at least to have this barrier solved, which is the insurance and some other things like establishing the company there. But to that point, I think it's very important to do an analysis at the beginning, understand the market size, understand the penetration of smartphones, the payment means as well, not only credit cards. People in Germany, for example, they use PayPal. If you don't have PayPal, you will not succeed. So things like that. And after you start analyzing these things in a very methodic way, you start to have a picture. But at the end, it's all about people, it's all about feelings. With that analysis, you cannot just go to the countries that are better on paper. You need to be really careful also on how to establish your presence in a country. And also you need big funding. It's super expensive to go abroad. Even if you have a proven technology that works, and we had a model in France that was super successful, as soon as we wanted to port it outside France, we had to be very careful, and we had to raise a lot of money to do that. So money, and then a big analysis, and also solving these barriers, because we cannot test by just doing a small A/B testing.
Is that your experience helping companies to get abroad? What do you see where they are taking the opportunities, and when they come to you, what is the pre-work that they have done to ask for your help?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that there, as the previous panelists have mentioned, there is no solution that will fit everyone. I think that everyone needs to find its own way, but there are some basic procedures that are ideas that might be worth looking into. The first thing is you need to understand not just what you sell, but you must do your best to understand what is it that people are going to be buying from you. Because at the end of the day, that changes enormously from one market to the other. So understanding what kind of need, desire, aspiration is it that you're catering for. The second thing is understanding very clearly that it's going to take more time and more money, and that has already been mentioned, that you initially planned. That's always the case when you're developing the market, but particularly so when you're developing internationally. The third point is maybe to make sure that you can afford for things not to work out at all. And if you run this algorithm and you find that you cannot accept things not working out, you might as well go right to the beginning and rethink things carefully. But I think there are 2 ideas that before that need to be considered. First of all, you need to have the mindset. I think here we were talking about the title of this panel. I think the one thing that you need to conquer is your own mindset. And let me share with you a very short story that on a discussion that I had with a Spanish entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur in the field of technology. Actually, he might have some trouble or he might not be the first choice of some risk capital because he's so serially focused that he might not be considered focused enough. Okay, but so I was discussing with him and I told him, "Do you think that Spaniards are risk averse?" I said, "Come on, no way. Spaniards are not risk averse." And if you think about it, we are a nation where we have too many small businesses, and by definition, small businesses are at a very high risk all the time. So he said, no, what Spaniards are averse is they are really averse to making fools of themselves. So the first thing that you need to conquer is to be prepared for things not to work out. And that also requires some preventive making fool of yourself, which is asking. And not everything is going to be in the hard data, particularly not when you are opening up new markets, when you are catering for new needs, because no one has done it before, or no one might have done it in that same market. So you really need to take a step into the dark, you really need to venture. But again, and with this I go back to what I said before, you really must make sure that you can still remain resilient to an outcome which is different than the one that you are hoping for.
Great. Felipe.
Okay, for me, I mean, on the mindset, that I think is a very good point. What I will say is that, especially in the new generations, I think that I've seen a big change on the mindset of the people. And being honest, I don't think that today, especially in the new generations, we had a big issue on that. I think that we are the country that has embraced the Erasmus program more heavily, whatever, in the world. So the reality is, especially new generations, really love going abroad, staying in contact. They don't have this barrier of culture. So for me, when I talk with entrepreneurs that come to see or whatever, it's much more of like 2-3 questions. The first is like, I mean, is there an opportunity for you to go abroad, and to which markets? Because there is always this romanticism about like launching internationally. I want to be Facebook, Uber, whatever. But the first question is, we need to be honest with ourselves. Is there an opportunity everywhere in some countries? For us, for me, I mean, personally, the aha moment was when I went to London, to San Francisco, and I started to see all these help wanted papers on the restaurants and the small shops. And it was like, oh, there's a problem here. If in San Francisco, they need to hire people with the help wanted on the screens. Then our first market that we launched abroad, actually the reality is that we didn't land that for this mentality. The truth is that if we keep on launching in cities in Spain, we were not going to get the money that we needed in order to build this marketplace. I mean, the reality is, for being a marketplace, and you know that you need a lot of money, because you need to build that. You need to solve the chicken egg problem, a lot of things. So London for us, it was a bet on like, if we can prove that we can get some decent metrics over there, probably we're gonna get money. The truth is as well, we haven't done that again, just launching somewhere else to get money from that launching has been much more, okay, so we have this big opportunity to launch everywhere. The second question is, you need to understand how your model works and how it scales. No? Everyone, when you talk with investors, is like, do you have a playbook? You will say yes, even though that you don't have it. But the truth is, after launching the second, third, fourth city, you're going to start to have this playbook. And in some cases, there are some businesses that they can launch in another place, everything remotely, and they can test. For us, we're a city-by-city business, very similar to Uber. So actually, we can get the candidates online, but we cannot get the companies, because we are dealing with small restaurants. So there was a funny anecdote when we did a small test in Santiago de Chile, and we were able in 2 weeks to get the 10% of the whole population in Santiago de Chile in Job and Talent. But 2 businesses. So it was not working. So for us, we need to have people on the ground. Yeah. So if your business requires to have people on the ground, that's going to be more complicated. Because the reality is that once you decide a city and you put people there, it's going to be very hard to cut that. Because it's not like cutting Google AdWords. It's cutting people. So I also think that if you need to do that, I mean, you really need to think about it, because it's also going to get a lot of focus. I think like launching somewhere else is going to be 5 to 10 times harder than your Excel spreadsheet will say. So I think that it's also very important to understand if there is an opportunity and what is the correct moment, what is the time to launch there. Because it's going to absorb much of your time if you are the founder and you are alone. So you need to keep that in mind. Then there are a lot of variables to choose which city and which not, but for me, The most important is to choose on the strategic level if there is the opportunity and if it's the correct time for you to do it.
Okay, great. I want to share with you an anecdote. I was having a beer with the development team of Badoo, you know, this matchmaking platform to girls and boys. Yeah. Yeah. With the development team. Okay. And they were at a time that they were launching products and they were scaling, and they were a successful business model for premium, for example, in UK, and they were launching in Brazil. And the problem is that the premium in Brazil didn't work because the matching was so fast that nobody asked for premium. Okay? And that dramatically changed the business model of Badoo at the moment to enter to a Brazilian market that is a huge market. I would like to ask you two questions. Where is the limit when you need to really change your business model of your company, at the end, the DNA, to be able to get the opportunity in a country? How much flexible you need to be? Because when you are landing there, most probably you need to fine-tune your business model to be able to get the opportunity there. But if this fine-tune is so dramatic, you can end up being another company for another country. And the other, and the amazing thing that I always listen from entrepreneurs, you raise a big amount of money and then you scale and you go from 100 to 200 to 300. How you're able to manage that madness, to keep some sort of a company culture, if you want to call it in that way? What is your point in these two questions?
Regarding the first thing, I don't think changing the business model is such a big deal. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's something that it's evolving as long as the company is evolving, and especially for marketplaces. And Felipe was talking about the job and talent problem, and it's very similar to the Uniplaces problem. We've talked about that many times, and there are a lot of experience we share together. And it's very similar, and I don't think that changing the business model is something that you, as the same as the market, as the locations you go, is something you test. Probably for some technological related business could be phone, for example, is kind of different. I assume and I assure that any telco has a different perspective about how they want and where they want. And for our side, it's a little bit different. We have two sides of the market that we are managing, and we have to look for the right balance. And obviously, at some point, it depends on the country, but that you want to charge from one side or not another. But at the end of the day, it's not such a big problem. In our case, the second question you addressed is way bigger. But at the same time, is the right one. So, for example, Felipe said you need some people local to go for the one side of the marketplace. Same happened for us. If you are trying to work remotely, we tried 1.5 years ago to go global faster, and then some of our advisors, one former VP of Uber, said, "What the fuck are you doing?" So go in another way and look for the right people in the local countries. Focus in trying to solve the chicken egg problem. In our case, is clearly a supply. The demand, as long as we have very, very good agreement on the demand side and globally it's good, you have to focus in that part and look for the right people for this. In our case, the supply side is the real estate. And the real estate guys, as you all know, are very, very cool and very young and very whatever. So no, right? So we have to look for the right people right there in local countries, local cities. It's very clear that you have to go this, and at the same time, it happens fast. It happens fast, euros, whatever amount of money, and the investors and say, you scale. I think it's very important, and it's how you address by the time of conquering the kind of investors you have. So you have investors that can provide you very, very good insights about scaling, about hiring, about that, because at the end of the day, most of us, I think, we know nothing about this stuff until we try and fail many times. And obviously having this kind of advice is going to make a total difference in terms of hire people in the correct pace and with the correct talent.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you know what? I'm going to answer that question the same way before. To change your business model is not a burden. You go test your business model to get feedback and adjust it. Right? Unless you nailed it, your Facebook, and you nailed it and suddenly it flies and is everywhere the same and all you need to do is adjust a little bit. you guys are going to change probably a little bit. You're probably going to change a little bit. I doubt that you're going to have cars, I don't know, all over the world, the same type of cars, let me put it this way. When I say mindset, you go out and you test it, and you get feedback, okay? Had we tested it only in Spain, I wouldn't be sitting here. No way. Right? It didn't work at all. We thought it's an excellent idea, but for some reason in Spain, we just didn't take off for a long time. So you go and you try it, and of course you adjust. How much do you flex your business model? How much do you adjust your business model for each market? I don't think there's a generic answer. It's a tough product road mapping is a tough exercise in itself. When you do that with different cultures, it becomes even more difficult. I don't know what the answer is there, really. I think you need to have a vision of what your product, what your company stands for, and the flexibility to say it works in certain markets differently than in others. Okay? Now, let me take an example of fun. The fun model is largely or to a large extent based on that we make money by people who buy access to the internet, to Wi-Fi, when they're not members of the community. Okay? Well, when we went, take Japan again, but I could take Brazil as well, when we went to those markets, we dropped that thing for regulatory reasons. Because basically we sat with the Ministry of Communication in Japan, and there were as many panel members from the ministry as you guys here, and I here, they convinced us that we had to change our business model. Well, we did. And we found another one. Now, we didn't change it for the whole world because we thought this is not something that's applicable to the whole world. So it's applicable for certain parts of the planet where regulatory constrains you more than in others. We found another business model there. The operator paid us. I think that's it's a bit of an exercise. And of course, if you say, I have to be successful in India, well, then you probably have to adjust a lot. Okay? Then it would adjust the business model too much. It's iterative, I would say. It's iterative. I mean, I would never go into the thing and say you need to justify, you need to be individualized for each market because at the end of the day, nobody's going to finance you. Exactly. You can't tell the story. You can't even hire people, which comes to the second thing. So you need to maintain one story of what you are. Culture, there's some companies that I think have done an amazing job in growing globally, maintaining their playbook, maintaining their culture, having exactly clear who they hire. You go after certain kind of business school grads, certain backgrounds, Well, with our investors, we have found it very easy to attract good people. But then you learn that good people in different markets look a little bit different, right? It's not, when you go to certain markets and you look for the exact same profile, it's tough. So it's a little bit, what you need to maintain, I think, is not, at least in our case, which is not one that you can playbook again and again and again. Okay, Uber, and I guess there's some models you successfully modeled exactly that, where you repeat the same again and again. We took a more pragmatic approach. What we did maintain is culture. Right? Hiring the people that fit into your organization, that like what you do, that share a vision, that that you want to go hang out with, that you're not worried about when they sit alone in the conference and present your vision, that it's something completely different, right? No matter which market in. And when you then open, because they are the ones that then hire people as well, right? So they represent your culture, and when these people will come to which is here our head office, you want to make sure that they get along well with each other. No, we do not have an extensive, let's say, this is how you open another market, another one, because it wasn't needed in ours. I do think, though, that once you get into scaling city to city, when the model is scale city to city, you need to develop something along those lines. But I think culture, like hiring process, has to be the same again and again, because otherwise you're going to end up with a big mess.
Okay. You want to add something?
Wow, so just to put a bit more context on how we did it, and answering your questions on how much can we flex the product or the system, what we decided at Drivey when we started expanding was to have a centralized multi-language operations headquarters in Paris. And then in the countries, we would have marketing and communications teams. And this was the idea in a way that it would be easier to have a single product that could work everywhere. Then the reality is a bit difficult because we are conquerors. It's like war on each of the countries, and you realize that there are rules, regulations that are different, payment means, what I thought about PayPal in Berlin. We didn't expect to have changes like that on the product. But it's important to keep focus on what you really do well, and you cannot expand internationally without having a very, very clear product that you know works and that you know can port it otherwise. Because if you have something undefined, it will be a mess. You will end up having totally different things in different countries. And what's something important to keep in mind is that on a single country, there are areas. So for example, when you have a startup in one country, one market, there is marketing, finance, there are areas. But once you start having countries, this becomes a matrix. So you need to keep a super strong product, and there are bottlenecks on that matrix. The product team, for example, the developers, they cannot do all the changes. So you need to be extremely careful not to flex the product too much, not to accept too many things, and always think internationally. Because otherwise, you would be dead. It gets exponentially complex. And just a little example, for example, when you start adding new countries, you need to translate all the content. And this is multi-language. Okay, it's just changing the content. But at the same time, if you have different things for different countries, for example, rules that are different, there is the localization, which means for Spain, cars registered in Spain need to meet these extra rules. For France, these extra rules. And this is different than multi-language. You cannot put in Spanish this rule, but in German the other rule. Because there are German drivers driving Spanish cars. They need to have the German rules for Spanish cars. So this is the matrix that I was talking about again, and it's exponential. You need to be very careful not to flex the product too much.
You know, briefly, I think that unless you are in the business of lecturing, you're systematically you're in the business of learning. And that means that you need to adapt permanently your business model. That shouldn't be a tragedy. And it certainly is a necessity, considering that business development and raising money are more and more interlinked. You were telling about your own story. Basically, when you choose the one location that you might be finally moving into, it has a lot to do with validation of your concept, and that validation is very much related to your capacity to further raise money and so on. So I think that adjusting your business model, it's a necessity, and as I said the first time with the first question you asked me, that's something that should start as soon as possible, even before you move outside. However, one thing is the business model, a different thing is the strategy. I think that when it comes to strategy, you really need to understand what kind of business you are in, because otherwise you might end up doing things that are basically not consistent. But I want to underline that at the end of the day, culture is the one thing that you shouldn't be compromising on. And I mean, there's a lot of talks about different generations working in different corporations or whatever. I might not fall necessarily into the category of a millennial, okay? No. But the one thing that people in different age stages do care about is culture. And the more years go by, the more you care about the culture. Maybe at the beginning, when you're starting off a business, it's all about sharing some interest in specific technology or this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, as Alex said, you want to make sure that you spend most of your hours with people that you can somehow relate to. And to me, that's the basic element. I mean, you need to adjust your model, but you need to keep your course, basically, to safeguard your strategy. But even that, it's eventually negotiable, depending on your, maybe changes in capital, or whatever it is. But the one thing that you shouldn't be compromising on is culture. Because otherwise, the the business will be completely different. And culture, at the end of the day, it's about the people. It's about the people you hire. It's about the people you keep. It's about how you promote people and how you reward people. And culture, and how do you find out what culture is about in a specific organization is the one thing that people brag about near the coffee machine, if there's a coffee machine. That's not too old, is it? You still have coffee machines, right? Okay.
Espresso.
Espresso, yes,
Espresso.
it's an espresso, yes.
Nespresso, coffee machine, Nespresso.
And it's the one thing that people exaggerate. So people understand very quickly what the culture of the organization it's all about.
I mean, from my side, what I would say is on changes on the product, what I think is if you launch in a country and you need a deep change on the product so that there is not going to be product market fit without that change, that is going to be extremely complex. And probably you're not going to do it because you're in headquarters and you're not going to see the full problem as the people in the ground are seeing. So my take in there is that you are facing that situation. Probably, I mean, the country is going to fail because you're not going to change it. So I will even go out from that place because I think it's very different changing the product or changing the product market fit and making some tweaks on the product to adapt a bit the business model, adapt like here people that they don't like to upload CVs, but in the UK they like, or here people they don't want to share their salary and in the UK they want. So I truly think that in most of the companies that they succeed, the product, the 80% of the product is the same. And the curves is going to be very similar from city to city. Then you need to adjust some of the things. Even, I mean, companies like Uber have had to do it. Like when Uber was launching, I think it was in Kenya. I mean, no one in Kenya had credit cards. And it was like, the country manager in Kenya was just like yelling at Travis, like, hey, people cannot here actually get the car. And they didn't want to do that because from the headquarters, the view was like everything should be credit card, automatized, seamless, perfect. And in the end, finally, they made that change probably after a couple of months. And it has worked, and they have launched this credit card in different places. But still, for me, that's a tweak on how the product works. And probably you're going to do such a big trick once the product is very successful in very different locations. So from my experience, the product that you launch in the country is going to be the 90% of the country, what the country manager is going to have. And they need to know that. Because in most of the companies, product and marketing typically works from headquarters, and they give service to the countries. So in the end, the country manager, then he owns the P&L, and he's responsible for the country, but the product and marketing, at least for us, is a given. So that's also create a lot of tension inside the company. Because, I mean, the country is not delivering, but who is the fault? The product is not adapting, marketing is not giving me the candidate I need. So managing that is super tough, and that's where I think it's linked with the culture, because I think that typically the problem that we had, it has been more like people problems, like two guys that they didn't understand each other, and that probably to build a culture, if I could say one thing, is choose properly the country manager, because I mean that's going to be the local entrepreneur. And he's going to make most of the hirings. He's going to make the parties on Fridays. I mean, he's going to create the culture. So for me, if I could just say one thing on the culture in the countries, is try to get the country manager that fits. That's very complicated. One thing that we have been doing is we have some people on headquarters that they are specialized in different areas. So we send those guys to launch new cities, like they're the launchers. So they go to the city. They start to see how things work, how the supply, how the demand, feedback to product, and actually they are bringing CVs, interviewing people, and then we interview them to try to find this country manager, because probably it's one of the most complicated things that we have done when we are talking about internationalization. And when you look at that, amazing cities with a regular country manager, they're not going to take off, and normal cities with an amazing country manager, they're going to smash it. So, I mean, I will really invest time on choosing that person.
Country manager has to be local, or has to be somebody with a legacy that has been working on the headquarters for years, and that is a guy of overconfident that I can send it there, and I know if it doesn't work, it's because our product don't have product market fit.
In our side, we have like, in London it's a local one, but in Mexico and Colombia they are not local, they are Spanish, but they have been living there for for many years. And for me, what has been most successful is that the person has the drive, and he's kind of a good fit for being a country manager. It is a very operational role, and has to have some strategic view and able to push things. So I don't think that there is a
rule?
A rule of local or not local.
Okay, if you like, you don't mind, we can open some Q&A to the public. We are almost 5 minutes to finish the panel. If there is questions from the audience? No questions?
You know, I would like to add one more thing to
Okay,
what
sure.
you. Sorry, if there was ever a question I cut off. Why is there no global Spanish companies apart from Zara, apart from really successful technology companies? Again, I think one thing is mindset, the other thing is
Money.
access to capital. Exactly.
Yeah.
We just commented. There's some companies here that share the same shareholder. Atomico is a company that believes that companies that are not based in the Silicon Valley can go global. When we raised money, we had one investor out of the Silicon Valley. He told us, if you don't go there, I'm not going to invest into any other round. Didn't invest in any other round. That thing, until now, it was impossible to launch an international company out of Europe. Right? Now, we've seen some examples, luckily. Spotify, many of them are Swedish, British. But what we need here in Spain is, basically this was very consistent. Everybody says the same thing of how you scale. Right? And there is no recipe. But the way this works is you find somebody who's done it close enough at a beer, and it tells you. Right? And quite honestly, I met the guys from Spotify at some case because we're close enough. And when they were scaling, every now and then we were comparing notes. Okay? Did you interview this guy? So this helps you. You're not competing against. We're not competing against each other at all. We're going to benefit from each other. I hope that you guys scale really quickly, so I'm going to get some benefit from that as well. And all of you, because the reality is that's what we need here. And then you'll find people who have done it once and who have done it twice. I mean, and that's where you guys come in. Hopefully with a lot of money and support, where the government puts something in place. Where hiring international people becomes a little bit easier, because then you bring somebody here who's done it before. I think that's the biggest challenge of Spain is that, not having seen other guys who have done this on a large scale, repetitive, and all of us saying, wow, these guys have done it. They're not so much smarter than us. We can do it too.
Yeah. But I think that, every month there are new examples on that. I truly think TicketBiz, Cabify. I think that we are in a positive mood, and that in the next 6 to 9 months, there are going to be many more. Exactly. And the entrepreneurs that now, where I meet them, is they are almost even somewhere else. Yeah. So I think that, that's already there, and it will take 5 to 10 years and this capital to really get there. Right. But I think that we are on the track.
There's a lack of people on the other side, on the venture capital side, that we have a global fund from Spain. So as you talk about Spotify, and you talk about Northern Europe, and we were talking about Atomico. The same side, you go to talk to London, and you're talking about Benchmark, perfectly. But if you go to Southern Europe in general, or go to Europe, Berlin is starting to ramp up at the same time as there's both sides of the same marketplace working. There's the entrepreneurs, and also there's the venture capital. Here, there's no real global fund. There are funds growing. There are nice funds. And there's no such a big thing. We don't have our guy who sells for any trillion and then goes the thing. And there maybe is the place where these guys from the government can help with that, because at some point, if you go, I don't know, if you say about legislation regarding stock options in Spain, is basically you're paying your tax in advance, which is crazy if you want to.
Try to explain that to an American.
Yeah, that's the thing. For example, we just brought the CPO from Flickr to Uniplaces, and the main problem he has was, okay, I was on Flickr, I've been 15 years in Silicon Valley, and what's going on with my stock options in Europe? And you say, oh, well, okay, which country you want to be located, and which country? Yeah, you have to pay in advance. So it's again the same problems of that Europe, at the end of the day, is not a single country, not a single market at the end.
Okay, let's go for the question. It was there one before, I think. Okay, anyway.
Thanks for the conversation, guys. Very interesting. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on the way of expanding to a new country? Should you kind of test out your product first, kind of dip your toes first, or should you just go all in with all your potential and see how it goes?
who take it. We are run out of time. One can answer, and there is another question before that.
And as I said before, it depends on your product. On our side, it's very complicated to test it in advance. So typically what we do is we go there and we try to talk with customers, with potential clients, and to understand if it can work. If you can just launch it from here in a small test, I mean, go for that.
I would like to add as well that in our case, we started testing like cities, city by city, but we decided it's better to launch the entire country. So now we are full when launching a country.
We are city-wise.
Okay, the question, please.
Hi, Tanya from Blue Specs here. We run an IoT accelerator, and I wanted to ask you how you choose the first country you go into for expansion. Because a lot of our startups automatically, the Spanish ones at least, automatically look to South America, which might have its advantages, but I think within Europe you have a similar legal system. In the Eurozone you don't have to factor in things like currency and stuff like that. So how did you pick your first country for expansion? Thanks.
Who wants to take it?
I take it. And in our case, the thing is that the country chooses us. Because at the end of the day, because at the end of the day we have a demand from this part coming, and you say about that, and for example, I would like to address one thing about that. I think the only good thing about Spain missing the internet for 15 years ago, when we had the opportunity to be the bridge with Latin America, is that we get close to Europe, so we started to be more European than Latin American. It's the only good thing we got about that, because we had a huge opportunity 15 years ago to be the bridge from Europe to Latin America, and the good thing about that is that we had to learn to be the worst in Europe and starting to look more. And I think even cultural fit, it's easier to us to go to, I don't know, London, Milan, Berlin, or whatever, than to Sao Paulo. And also there are legal-wise and currency-wise, and you're not going to, I don't know.
10 seconds?
Yeah.
10 seconds.
10
Isaac is
seconds.
also
I would wonder what you want to prove. If you want to prove the model still because it works in one market, if you want to prove it works in another one, I would probably pick a market with similar characteristics, rather than go and take that model and go into an underdeveloped market, because then you don't have any proof case. You basically have more insecurity about if it works or not. So would I go to Latin America first? Probably not, because the disposable income is different, or payment is different. I'll probably go to France or Germany or one of those markets that looks more similar. And that's why you guys went to London, which I think is...
Isaac? And we'll close, sorry.
Very briefly about the government. Okay.
There's always a
no, very briefly.
No, we'll run over.
No, I think that when you consider the one thing that has changed the most in the past 10 years is really the building up of an ecosystem. So we have more small businesses, we have more bigger businesses that understand that it's in their own benefit to cooperate with smaller businesses. We have more connection with the universities. We have more industrial parks. And yes, the one thing that has been missing is the financing. And it's true that the government has put in place some initiatives to face up to that challenge, but it's also true that that requires traction from the private sector. I think that we need credibility with the private investors from abroad. We need those successes that Alex was referring to, so that can somehow play the role of can turn into role models. I think it's very important that we get foreign entrepreneurs here, and I want to take the advantage to thank Alex for being around, and any of you there in the room. And in that sense, I also want to point out the fact that very recently, there is one initiative, Chusa is there at the back, okay, who is leading the initiative that we sent out, which was Rising Startup Spain, by which we give very little money, sorry for the bad news, okay, but we assist in the facilitation of of the project of any foreign entrepreneur or Spaniard based abroad to come over and basically insert itself into the ecosystem. We were aiming for 100 applications. We had to close that down when we already had 150, which clearly shows that there is an interest around of coming on. But besides that, and let me tell you, the biggest change that I've witnessed in these 4 years when it comes to this kind of businesses is that we spend less and less time talking about instruments, about inputs, and more time spent talking about outcomes, about exits, about people that have managed to succeed. And that really it reinforces Felipe's argument that there's really something that is changing. I think that Alexis' work also in 4 years from now clearly shows that. We work together in Tel Aviv. In 1 year, it's fascinating to see the change that those companies have been going through. And there's a lot going on. We have a long way to go, that's obvious. And there is no room at all for complacency, at all. However, I think that we need also to acknowledge that we are in the right route and that thanks to you, things are moving forward. So I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you that the government is not going to solve your problems, in case any of you were wondering, but that the government has understood that it also needs to change its culture and the way in which we work in order to make sure that we can be useful to the new type of businesses which you represent.
Okay, thank you very much. We need to close because we are over time. I want to really thank these panelists. Really helpful, I think, insights from the ones who are trying to conquer some countries. And thank you very much to the audience. It has been a pleasure for me.